There is only one deal, and that deal won't be changed. The message from the European Commission President to Britain today, dealing a blow to Theresa May's hopes of negotiating an alternative arrangement for the Irish border after Brexit. Mrs May met the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn this afternoon for talks on the future described as a useful exchange of views, although Europe's chief negotiator said he hoped the meeting would lead to something more than only eating biscuits and drinking tea. With just 58 days to go till Brexit, our political editor Gary Gibbon is here. What's going on?
Well, what's going on is what Theresa May told us would go on. Remember when she used to back her deal, she said that was because the EU wouldn't accept anything else. And now that she's not backing her deal, but what her opponents wanted, funny enough, the EU is turning around and saying on cue exactly what she said they would say, which is forget it. And what some people close to the Prime Minister are saying is don't give up yet. There could be something in terms of some sort of consolation about how the backstop is temporary, something more solid that allows people who are slightly inclined to climb down from the positions they've got to in the House of Commons, allows them to climb down, but don't expect anything very soon, because there is a real feeling in Europe that they want to sit there silently and make Theresa May sweat it out for a while first, I think, before there is any engagement. It really doesn't feel as though there's going to be much engagement this week. How much engagement we actually get even next week, a moot point. But what we're in for right now is a period of real brinkmanship, and there will be an awful lot of talk about no deal because, of course, the Prime Minister is backing this policy, which she told us would never work. Jeremy Corbyn, with Labour's chief whip, walks across Parliament for a private meeting on Brexit with the Prime Minister. He'd finally accepted Theresa May's invitation for talks, going through the door to her office in the House of Commons, the day after she formally switched tactics and signed up to her Tory backbench rebels agenda, binning chunks of her own deal, potentially. It was far from clear the two would have much common ground, and there was little to suggest that 3 hours earlier when Jeremy Corbyn asked in the Commons chamber what her new plan was.
Could you set out today what these alternative arrangements might be?
Proposals such as unilateral exit mechanism or a time limit to the backstop, and the political declaration already references alternative arrangements and raises a number of issues that can be proposals that can be addressed, such as mutual recognition of trusted trader schemes.
Jeremy Corbyn!
None of that was very clear to me. I don't know about anybody else. The Prime Minister may have succeeded in temporarily uniting her very divided party. But, Mr. Speaker, is she willing to make compromises necessary that are more important, and that is to unite the country on a going forward to secure jobs and living standards right across the UK?
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he's a fine one to talk about coming together when it was only last night that he agreed to actually meet me to talk about these issues.
Across the Channel in Brussels, there was a defiant reaction to Theresa May's demand that the central chunk of the withdrawal agreement she negotiated and promoted must now be rewritten.
The withdrawal agreement remains the best and only deal possible. The debate and votes in the House of Commons yesterday do not change that. The withdrawal agreement will not be renegotiated.
In Dublin too, the idea of renegotiating along the lines of the amendment backed by Tory and DUP MPs last night was dismissed.
In terms of the Brady Amendment, it speaks of alternative arrangements. I do not know what those alternative arrangements are. We've been down that track before. And I don't believe that such alternative arrangements exist.
And I would ask my colleagues to give the Prime Minister space. They're not going to crumble tomorrow. We're going to have to hold our nerve, and we can be successful.
Prime Minister!
Can I say to my right honourable friend, he is absolutely right about the importance of the vote that took place last night.
Jean-Claude Juncker's turned round, Michel Barnier as well. The Irish, the Germans have all said absolutely not up for renegotiation. Is this a very short-lived project?
Well, there are others already in Europe who are saying differently, that they believe that they need to listen to the Prime Minister and
like
look
who?
to. Sorry, again. Somebody I can't pronounce is the answer. There's both. I can try and find out for you. So I just have. There's a member of Merkel's cabinet, and there's a poll. There are some in Europe, including leading German politicians, who are saying that actually they do need to listen to Theresa May. And what Europe has been saying to us consistently is for Parliament to show what it wants. That is what happened last night.
Tory backbenchers like John Whittingdale did get backing for their demand for a right to exit the backstop from Jeremy Corbyn, speaking after his meeting with Theresa May.
She listened. I listened to her replies, of course, and we then discussed various issues surrounding the problems of the backstop, which she is going to talk to the EU about. And I pointed out that this would be the first time in British history we'd entered into an arrangement with treaty arrangement with anybody else in which there was no right to leave, because it would be a decision could be made only by the other side. And she's heard these arguments before.
She certainly has, but mainly from the pro-Brexit Tory MPs who tried to kill off her premiership with a vote of confidence last month.
The ayes to the right, 317.
Last night, though, the pressure was on some of the pro-Remain wing of the party, refusing to back Theresa May's shift on Brexit. The chief whip turned on former Education Secretary Justine Greening. He gestured with his hand. "We are this close to being out of power," he said. Justine Greening paused, then, as he walked away, called out, "It's your fault for being so rubbish." Pro-Remain Tories have already started plotting how they might bite back after last night's setback, regrouping to try to force a delay or shift in policy on a leader they feel has lurched right.
Well, here in Brussels, I have to say the resounding chorus to Theresa May's proposal has been a no, although with a few dissenting voices, and those in London rummaging around for dissent may point to the occasional German politician here or there. I mean, overwhelmingly, the evidence is that they're not going to give in to Theresa May's demands. In fact, they're even wondering why on earth she's coming here. But then, as Gary said, they're also going to be holding firm for the next 2 weeks, sitting on their hands and watching London squirm, as one of them put it to me here. At the same time, there's quite a lot of exasperation that all those 18 months of hard labour, which resulted in 585 pages of that withdrawal agreement, that Michel Barnier was parading around like a newborn baby, well, all that, frankly, is ancient and rather bitter history by now. The question really in everyone's mind here is, how much longer can we put up with this? Brexit calls again. Witness the post-prandial stampede into the European Parliament for a special debate on what the hell happens next. Theresa May is promising or threatening to come back to Brussels to try and ditch the backstop. Should they agree? Pick your language.
Nej, det synes jeg ikke. Nej. No is nej.
No renegotiating of this treaty right now.
No.
No.
Nej.
No.
Nej, no.
Do you think the backstop should be renegotiated? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh, okay, why?
Because I think it could be better. I think it could be worked out much better.
A rare yes in a day of no's. Brexit has become a bit like this powerful Hoover, noisy and sucking up everything. So here they were again, the EU's Brexit steering group, navigating the corridors of power with another London-induced political hangover. What is the point of Theresa May coming to Brussels if you're not going to open up the withdrawal agreement?
I don't think there is room to do that for the simple reason that the backstop is absolutely needed, and this backstop is in the withdrawal agreement. But there is a possibility to discuss the future relationship.
There are Tories who still think you're going to blink on the backstop.
I think the backstop is an insurance, and an insurance is needed to be 100% sure that there is no border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, and we don't want ourselves that the backstop is used. This is, like I said, a guarantee, a safeguard. But it depends a lot on what the future relationship will be. If this future relationship, for example, is a customs union, that makes it completely different.
But the UK and the customs union could be as magical thinking as ending the backstop. They huddled for an hour and then faced the inevitable question. Mr. Barnier, is a no-deal scenario now the most likely?
Yeah, the only point I want to make is to confirm that the EU institutions remain united. And we stand by the agreement we have negotiated with the UK, never against the UK. Thank you very much.
You're not going to blame. But the bad blood is rising, and this from the longest-serving MEP, a veteran of 4 decades of jousting with London.
I'm only in despair when I look to the House of Commons and this government, which has not one constructive idea together, which has a majority.
They love teachable artwork here. This one is called Unity Through Diversity. Shake one piece and the whole thing rattles. Again, a bit like Brexit and the EU. Das ist die Strategie. A perfect backdrop for speaking to the embodiment of Anglo-German goodwill, David McAllister, close ally of Angela Merkel, son of a British officer and a German music teacher.
Our red lines are that we have to protect the integrity of the single market and that we want to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic under all circumstances. And that's why we were working for 18 months on this withdrawal agreement. And it's such a pity that in the moment we only have a majority of people who are saying no to what we have negotiated together with the British.
You sound exasperated.
No, I will always respect the United Kingdom. I have a British passport since I was born. I love this country. I love the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. It's just so sad.
Sad, bewildered and yet determined. The Brexit mood in Brussels. Well, let's bring in another prominent voice here in Brussels to do with Brexit. Philip Lamberts, MEP, head of the Green faction and, of course, member of the Brexit Steering Committee. Thanks for coming on this rather freezing roof here in the middle of Brussels.
Welcome to Brussels.
So there are still people in London, in fact probably an increasing number of people after last night's vote, who think that you lot will blink in 2 weeks' time, that basically your hard position at the moment regarding the backstop will eventually change when faced with a cliff edge. True or not true?
I don't think it's true. The fact is that the EU27 know where their interests lie, and what is asked of us by the vote last night in Westminster is basically to forget about the backstop. But actually, what that would mean, if you want to avoid a border in Ireland, would be to open up a 550-kilometre backdoor into the single market, which equates to negating the single market and destroying it. So just as if the United Kingdom would open its doors not to goods, but to people without controlling them. That cannot be accepted by the Europeans. So yes, no-deal Brexit would have a cost for the Europeans, not just for the UK. But the cost of the destruction of the single market would be an order of magnitude bigger.
Are you genuinely worried that the invisible border on the island of Ireland will become a kind of smuggler's paradise, that we're going to force chlorinated chickens on the European market, on the single market in the future?
Well, if I have to listen to some of the hard Brexiteers, absolutely. I mean, the likes of Boris Johnson have basically done their utmost to destroy trust. They want to make the United Kingdom a paradise for multinationals, basically reducing social, environmental, health standards. And then they would like basically us to open that border without any checks. They must be out of their minds.
Are you being a bit paranoid about that?
Paranoid? You know how business works? Well, I know because I've worked in a multinational for 22 years. And it's not just the UK. If I were a third country multinational and I know that this backdoor exists, I would certainly invest in the UK so that I can channel goods within the single market without a free trade agreement.
But if there is no agreement, if Britain crashes out of the EU, leaves without a deal, then the very thing that everyone is trying to avoid, the hard border on the island of Ireland, will become a reality.
I know, but it's going to be the UK's fault. I mean, it was the UK's sovereign decision to say, okay, we quit, forgetting that actually the UK is bound by the Good Friday Agreement. And so if the UK removes one of the bases of the Good Friday Agreement, that is its membership of the EU, then it has to replace that with something else. And that something else is the backstop.
But you're going to feel the pain as well, aren't you? I mean, you know, the German car industry is having a bad time at the moment. Germany's teetering on recession. One German senior politician said this would be like a Lehman shock to the European economy.
Let's not overemphasize that. Would that be painful for the EU27? Absolutely. But again, destroying the single market would be even more harmful. It's really a question of, that's the calculus. And when people bank on us blinking, look at what happened with Greece. When we had the Greek crisis, ultimately what drove the decision was keeping the integrity of the monetary union. This time it's going to be the integrity of the single market.
In 5 seconds, is a no-deal scenario now the most likely, yes or no?
I think it's the most likely at the moment, absolutely.
Philip Lamberts, thank you very much indeed. A very sobering line there from one of the senior politicians in this city dealing with the Brexit business. Back to you in London.
Matt, thanks very much. Matt was talking there about the return of a hard Irish border, and across the Atlantic, a US congressman has put forward a bill opposing that very eventuality. Brendan Boyle, who has Irish ancestry, said he was concerned that a hard border could threaten the Good Friday Agreement. I spoke to him earlier in Washington and asked what he was hoping to achieve.
Myself and a number of us want to make clear that the United States is still engaged diplomatically in this issue, the same way we were in the 1990s when we first kicked off the peace process by appointing George Mitchell to be the special envoy.
I mean, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, would say she is absolutely committed to the Good Friday Agreement and that she, too, doesn't want to see a return of a hard border. And that's why she's trying to get a deal to avoid that. What do you say to that?
Well, I appreciate those words and I appreciate the sentiment, but it also has to be in writing. The fact that a backstop was agreed to, in fact, I believe it was even Theresa May and her government's idea. She goes to Brussels, signs up to it, and then last night in the UK Parliament advocates that it be rescinded. That does not exactly instill a great deal of confidence, certainly not here in Washington.
Do you sympathise at all with Theresa May in that she's caught between a rock, you know, in the shape of the EU, and a hard place, her own party? Do you have any sort of human sympathy for her?
As a politician, I have sympathy for anyone who would be in her position, and I think that she's someone who's attempting to soldier on and do what she thinks the right thing. However, I have far more sympathy for the family members of the 3,500 lives that were lost during the Troubles, and want to do everything in my position possible to make sure we never return to those bad old days. And make no mistake about it, a hard border would likely bring them back.
I mean, the former Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, suggested that we're all sort of getting too hung up on this issue of the Northern Ireland border. I mean, he described it as a gnat, the Irish border problem, and he compared a border crossing to travelling between two different districts in London. I mean, what do you make of that?
That is almost an insulting comment. I don't think peace in Ireland is a gnat. It's a shame that Boris Johnson seems to have that view. That certainly isn't the view here on Capitol Hill, and it shouldn't, frankly, be the view anywhere.
Well, how do you think Theresa May herself is viewed as a potential trading partner, someone you're going to enter negotiations with over the next few years after Brexit, you hope?
Well, I'm not going to personalize this to the Prime Minister. I have great respect for her, indeed all of the members involved. I'll just say that anytime you're entering a negotiation, trust is critical. The ability to say tomorrow what you agreed to today is critical. So when you sign up to an agreement and then you renege and you advocate for an amendment that takes away the critical part of that agreement, that does not exactly inspire confidence.
Your president might say, you know, the art of the deal is playing tough, and maybe that's exactly what Theresa May is doing.
I'll leave my Trump comments for another day. I'm a Democratic member of Congress, and I haven't exactly been shy about my disagreements with President Trump. I'll simply say that this situation is complex enough.
Brendan Boyle, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, back to Brexit now, and a High Court judge has approved a scheme by Barclays to move 190 billion euros in assets to Ireland amid the Brexit no-deal uncertainty. The bank had argued that it could not wait any longer. Our economics correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, is with me to explain.
Christian, I mean, this is important because it's showing a British company being forced to press the red button on its contingency no-deal plans. I mean, put quite frankly, time is running out. And Barclays, like other banks, had hoped that a deal would give them legal cover for their historical transactions. In a no-deal scenario, of course, there's no such guarantee. And the result is that Barclays is now trying to move 190 billion euros from the UK to Ireland. The High Court approved that after Barclays insisted it simply could not wait any longer. Now, I spoke to their chairman, John McFarlane, earlier this afternoon, and he said they had to be prepared because there still isn't any clarity. He told me they have to be conservative and plan for an exit in March.
So is this just an accounting exercise? Or
Well, they haven't moved the money quite yet. This is just the permission so far, but it still represents a huge outflow, and Barclays isn't the only player here. It's estimated that financial institutions have shifted £800 billion of assets ahead of Brexit. Now, when it comes to Barclays, most of what's going is derivatives, and this activity represents huge amounts of profits, and profits mean huge amounts of tax revenues. And tonight, Krish, it's unclear whether the move will threaten important tax revenues here in the UK. Barclays are very keen to say that they will remain the UK's top 3 taxpayer, but if money moves, then tax might move as well. Just finally, RBS will have its own court ruling about transferring money out on the 22nd of February.
Thanks, Helia. Now, we are as ready as we can be. That's the message from the new boss of the Port of Dover. But less than a month into the job, Doug Bannister has told this programme the government hasn't yet made any practical preparation for the thousands of additional checks which will be required if the UK leaves without a deal. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, reports from Dover.
A bird's eye view of the free flow of freight, all 10,000 trucks, a day of it.
So, Siobhan, if you really want to see the most intense operation on earth for the management of freight activity, you got to come down to Dover.
Fresh American eyes on Britain's biggest port. The new chief executive, Doug Bannister, may be given to hyperbole, but in Dover's case, he's probably right. Nearly a fifth of the UK's trade in goods enters Britain through this port without so much as a lowered barrier or a raised clipboard. But now the man who came here from the port of Jersey is about to navigate Britain through uncharted waters as we prepare to leave the EU.
So far, while we know the guys and gals across government are working really, really hard on putting programs in place and getting understanding and not just in the United Kingdom, but also in the European Union as well about how this is all work, we still don't have firm direction on really what is going to be required.
This is the control centre, the heart of Dover. From up here you can see 2 ships are unloading 250 trucks, but the port here can cope with double that in a single hour. And it's a seamless flow because their exit point through customs is that little grey box down there. And as you can see, under current rules, all these trucks are simply waved through.
Of course, that won't be the case if we leave the EU with no deal and all these trucks suddenly need to be checked. But with no extra space or facilities on site, Mr Bannister's just praying the government understands the risk despite the lack of reassurance.
Is there anything actually physically happening on site here for additional checks?
So what we have received is we've received more what they are attempting to do. We haven't got any physical comfort. We haven't seen increased manpower. We haven't seen any new systems or processes. For us, the most important thing is what are the physical checks on the dock. That will, if those are minimal, then we can maintain operations. If a hard border therefore means that we have to have physical checks on the docks within our estate, then that is going to create a lot of problems for us.
But has the government told you that that is not going to be the case?
No.
Up the road, John James runs a freight firm that has its heart in Europe and is also Dover's biggest customs clearance agent. He's much more cautious and thinks gridlock is inevitable.
We've just been with the new boss of the Port of Dover, who says, without being complacent, that he's done all he can to be prepared. And come what may, Dover will operate on the 29th and 30th of March.
Well, we think it's completely opposite of that. The delays will occur simply because the customs clearance facilities are not in place to clear the cargo after the 29th of March.
Can you cope? Can Dover cope?
Dover won't be able to cope, we won't be able to cope. As I said, it will be an impossible situation.
As for the notion that technology could potentially replace form filling and physical checks, don't bank on that either, says Dover.
It seemed to me to be a very huge task to get it all in, tested and operational before the 29th of March.
I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, it can't happen. Surely, a man of your experience with ports.
It comes down to how they want to treat the border.
And you don't know how they want to treat the border?
We don't.
The government says, and last night even voted, to avoid a no deal and the disruption it would bring to places like Dover. But keeping a lookout is part of the job here. While the boss says he can control processes in his command, it's the politics over the horizon that could make his first few months very difficult indeed.
Now, the closer we get to Brexit, just 58 days now, the more polarised the country seems to be. The just get on with it mentality versus the please let it end. But how much are people's views being reinforced or pushed to extremes by targeted messages on social media? Kieran Moodley reports.
Order! Order! Westminster has been a noisy place of late. Order hard to find as MPs try to reach consensus, with many warning of the perils of a no-deal Brexit. But away from the noise, perhaps that message is not filtering through. The Brexit debate for Leavers has now become dominated by those advocating for no deal. Take these string of posts, shared tens of thousands of times on Facebook, declaring support for no deal. The top recent images and memes related to a no-deal Brexit that have been posted on pages have millions of followers between them. And few are linked to any mainstream media organisation or mainstream political party. We've identified one network of pages that sees the groups resharing and amplifying each other's posts, with over 500,000 followers across their pages. Most of the content is emotive, appealing in some cases to British nostalgia, but there are some questionable claims, often repeated, that Britain will automatically withhold the £39 billion divorce payment to the EU in the event of no deal. In fact, the government says the money may have to be paid in any scenario, and that food prices will fall and wages will rise in a no-deal Brexit, something they don't source to any economist and something that many prominent economists would dispute, and others even draw more shocking comparisons. And it's not just about memes, it's also about adverts, and from both sides of the debate. Since October, the People's Vote campaign, calling for a second referendum, have spent over £250,000 on adverts, the most of any political group on Facebook. But in the last week, there has been an uptick in adverts from Britain's Future, a pro-Brexit group. They've pushed out hundreds of adverts at a cost of £37,000, many micro-targeted to individual constituencies. One of those MPs targeted is Rupa Huck, whose constituents voted overwhelmingly to remain. The advert with her name and face on it directed people to send her an email. And in a WhatsApp group of Labour MPs, they're sharing the ads they're all receiving.
I mean, I noticed this weekend, actually, I was getting a suspiciously identical-looking email coming in called Britain's Future is in Your Hands. And, well, the claim of it was actually factually totally inaccurate. It said, your constituency voted to leave, you are dishonouring these people and disobeying democracy.
Huck says this is not just from one side. She recently received more than 200 emails calling for a second referendum.
I mean, I'm all for democratising things, and politics shouldn't just be about dusty committee rooms in Westminster. But I do think that there needs to be a degree of veracity and accuracy in these things. And I think there need to be tighter rules around political spending and adverts.
As focus shifts once more to the halls of Parliament and the corridors of Brussels, perhaps the real Brexit battle is being waged and won elsewhere.
Well, joining me now is Steve Edgington, who works for the Leave Means Leave campaign. How much of this targeted advertising is going on, and why is it going on, given there is no second referendum yet?
Well, on both sides, there are massive amounts of money being spent on targeted adverts. Now, I have to say that the Leave Means Leave campaign, which I'm involved with, which is the main pro-Brexit, pro-WTO campaign, has spent almost nothing on targeted adverts on Facebook, etc. The People's Vote campaign, on the other hand, have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds targeting specific adverts or micro-targeting to people on Facebook and other platforms. Now, we see...
But there's this new group now, Britain's Future, that's catching up quickly in the last few days, spending tens of thousands. So, I mean, it's happening on both sides. And it happened during the referendum campaign. So my question is, I mean, is it because you all think there is going to be a second referendum?
Well, I don't speak for Britain's Future, but what I can say is
Are you linked to them at all? I mean, do you have any link? You know, are you friends or joint campaigners or anything like that?
We're not joint campaigns. We don't communicate with the other campaigns.
No coordination.
There's no coordination. Look, we are a campaign that is talking about Brexit, and we think that we need to get our sides across, our point of view across online. The problem is that we have so many people out there talking about scare stories. Well, what I'm trying to say is this: look, we don't need to spend money online because we have so much organic growth. If you compare our statistics with the People's Vote campaign, for example, we get loads more clicks and engagement rates than them because our message is popular online. We don't feel the need to spend...
So your supporters are just sharing free material?
It's almost all organic. We spend very, very small amounts of money online, and the point is, look, we're happy to talk about the benefits of WTO. We want to be talking about sort of allaying people's fears of a WTO no-deal Brexit because the mainstream media and online is dominated by people who say that no deal is going to be a total disaster.
Yeah.
We don't believe that, so we're quite happy to put our message out there so we can reach more people across, you know, with an unedited
But there are
message.
assertions in all of those ads that, you know, are pretty out there. I mean, you know, I mean,
you're asking about ads that I haven't created, so I can't really answer for them.
But I mean, a lot of the claims are quite similar. I mean, you say you don't believe it's going to be a disaster. I mean, you know, okay, fine, you may not like experts either, but, you know, the government, the Prime Minister, the opposition, the majority of MPs, the majority of economists, they all think it's bad, you know, whether you think it's a disaster or not. And yet there are these very bold claims in all these ads and in some of the free material as well, just saying it's not, it's rubbish, just, you know, it'll be fine.
You say that the majority of experts believe that no deal will be a disaster. I will really challenge that because we talk to so many experts, 200 business leaders, for example, who've signed a letter saying that no deal. But I don't want you to you can't just say that no one thinks that no deal is not going to be a disaster because there's so many experts.
I said there's clearly a majority of people who think no deal is bad for Britain. Whether you think it's a disaster or not, that disaster is a particular word.
Lots of business people, Tim Martin,
last
you can
night,
speak to so many experts.
A majority of people voted to say they didn't want a no deal.
The majority of those people voted to remain in Parliament.
But let's get past that. I'm trying to talk to you about the point of your online campaigning. Are you trying to target voters or MPs?
Both. Look, we're happy to talk to politicians and journalists on Twitter and online. We want to get our point across to different publications like yourself. That's why we're quite happy to come into Channel 4 News and talk about why we think WTO will be a good thing for the country and, that, as I say, not a disaster. So many experts say that, in fact, it will benefit their businesses, etc., etc. But we're quite happy to talk to members of the public as well who are very much engaged in this. If you look at our rallies, we get thousands and thousands of people coming saying, look, we are really excited for a WTO. We need to walk away with our heads held high.
Let's not get into WTO now. It's the advertising stuff that is fascinating, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of it, and we'll come back and pick this up, I'm sure, if it builds and if there's a second referendum.